You're 26 years old, sitting at a cafe in the heart of Rome. The Colosseum towers in the distance. Golden light bathes the ancient cobblestones. Tourists at the next table are laughing, sipping Aperol spritzes, taking selfies, talking about how this is paradise. La dolce vita, they say. The sweet life. But you? You're not smiling. You're staring at your phone. Your bank account shows 250 euros. You have a master's degree in engineering. You speak 3 languages fluently. You did everything right. You followed every rule. You studied until 3 a.m. You graduated with honors. And yet, you're living in your childhood bedroom, sleeping under a poster from when you were 15, because the only job offer you've gotten this month is an unpaid internship requiring a 2-hour commute each way. You look up at those tourists again and something clicks. A terrifying realization washes over you. This country isn't for you anymore. It's become a theme park for them and a retirement home for your grandparents. You've become a ghost in your own home. Welcome to the Great Southern Exodus. Today we're diving deep, and I mean deep, into why the cradle of Western civilization is becoming a graveyard for ambition. Why the brightest minds in Italy, Spain, Greece, and Portugal are packing their bags for Berlin, London, and Amsterdam. And why, if nothing changes, these beautiful nations might cease to exist as functional societies. This isn't just their crisis. It's a warning for the entire developed world. Buckle up. We're going on a bumpy, sun-drenched ride to rock bottom. Let's start with a number that's become infamous across Southern Europe. 1,000 euros. For most of you watching from the US or UK, 1,000 euros, about $1,050, sounds like maybe a decent weekend trip, or rent for a closet-sized room in New York City. But in Southern Europe, this number has become a prison sentence. In Spain there's a term for it, Mileurista. This word was coined back in 2005 to describe young professionals earning just 1,000 euros per month. Back then it was meant as an insult, a mark of failure. The implication was, look at poor Antonio, he's a Mileurista. He can barely afford a car. Fast forward to 2025, and that term isn't an insult anymore. It's an aspiration. It's the golden ticket. Because the alternative? Is far, far worse. Imagine you're fresh out of university in Madrid. You have a law degree. You step into the job market full of hope, and you quickly realize that 1,000 euros a month would be incredible. What? Because what you're actually being offered is the Becario loop, the endless cycle of unpaid or barely paid internships. Let me hit you with some genuinely horrifying statistics. According to OECD data, real wages in Italy have actually fallen over the last 30 years. Read that again slowly. While Germans got richer, while Americans experienced tech booms and rising salaries, the average Italian worker has less purchasing power today than they did in 1990. Italy is the only country in the developed world where this has happened. Let's play out a real scenario. You're Julia. You live in Milan, supposedly Italy's economic powerhouse, its financial capital. You land a job at what seems like a prestigious marketing firm. The office is sleek. Modern furniture. The espresso is free. You feel like you've made it. Then you get the contract. It's a stage, an internship. The pay. 600 euros per month. They call it reimbursement for expenses. Now let's do some basic math. A room, not an apartment, just a room, in a shared flat in Milan with mold in the corner and a radiator that sounds like a dying animal, costs about 700 euros per month. See the problem? You're technically employed. You're wearing professional clothes. You're commuting to an office. But you are mathematically insolvent. You're losing money just by existing. This is the reality for millions of young Southern Europeans. They are the working poor. And the psychological toll is absolutely devastating. It creates what I call a state of perpetual adolescence. You can't get married. You can't buy a house. Forget buying, you can't even rent. You can't have kids. You're 32 years old, asking your mother for pocket money to buy pizza on Saturday night. And here's the cherry on top of this depressing Sunday. When these young people complain, when they take to the streets or tweet about their misery, what do politicians say? In 2007, a famous Italian politician called them bambaccioni, big babies. Overgrown children who just love their mamas cooking too much to leave home. It's gaslighting on a national scale. It's not the economy, stupid, it's that you're too lazy to move out. Meanwhile, the landlord wants a deposit equal to 3 months of salary you don't have, for an apartment you can't afford anyway. So what do? You check Ryanair flights to Dublin. You scroll through LinkedIn jobs in Amsterdam. You realize with crushing clarity that your country loves its past, but it absolutely hates your future. Now let's talk about who actually holds power in Southern Europe. Who uses it? And who's getting crushed by it? Walk around a typical town in rural southern Italy or Greece, and you'll notice something immediately. It's quiet. Very, very quiet. You see elderly men playing cards in the square. Grandmothers dressed in black, buying bread. The cafes are filled with retirees sipping coffee at 3 p.m. on a Tuesday. Where are the kids? Where's the noise? Where's the energy? They're not there. They left. Southern Europe is undergoing a demographic winter so severe it makes Game of Thrones look like a tropical vacation. Italy has the second oldest population in the world, right behind Japan. But unlike Japan, which is a technological powerhouse with efficient systems and a high-trust society, Southern Europe is burdened with massive debt and bureaucracy that moves at the speed of a glacier. This brings us to the core problem, the gerontocracy. Rule by the old. In a democracy, numbers matter. When the majority of voters are over 55, politicians don't campaign on innovation, digital infrastructure, or affordable housing for young families. They campaign on one thing: pensions. Let me show you how insane this gets. During Greece's financial crisis, the government slashed education budgets. They cut healthcare spending. They gutted infrastructure investments. But they fought tooth and nail, to the very bitter end, to protect pensions. Why? Because that's where the votes are. Imagine you're a young Greek entrepreneur who wants to start a tech company. You need fast internet, clear tax laws, maybe a small business grant to get started. The government responds, "Sorry, no money available. We need to pay pensions for the generation that retired at 55. Yes, you heard that right. For decades, public sector employees in Greece could retire in their early 50s. There were documented cases of people retiring with full benefits because they had arduous jobs, which somehow included hairdressers and radio announcers. This creates a generational war nobody wants to talk about openly. The social contract is supposed to work like this. The young work to support the old, knowing that when they get old, the next generation will support them. It's an intergenerational compact. But young people in Portugal, Spain, and Italy are looking at the math and they're realizing, this Ponzi scheme is ending with us. They're being taxed to death to pay for the retirement of a generation that had cheap housing, stable jobs, and early retirement. And in return, they get crumbling universities, unpaid internships, and a pat on the head. There's a palpable resentment brewing. I remember reading a forum post from a guy in Lisbon who said, "I walk around my city and see old people sitting in cafes all day, living off rents from apartments I can't afford, voting for parties that increase my taxes. I don't hate them. But I can't afford to feed them anymore." It's brutal. It's uncomfortable. But it's the truth on the ground. And here's the political reality. Politicians are terrified of the gray vote. If you touch pensions, you lose the election. If you ignore the youth, well, they just leave. And here's the thing about demographics. Dead populations don't riot. They just emigrate. So politicians make the easy choice. They keep the elderly happy. And they watch the young board planes to Berlin and London. This creates a feedback loop from hell. As young people leave, the average age goes up even more. The tax base shrinks. The pension burden becomes even heavier on the few young people who remain. So more of them leave too. It's a death spiral. A demographic doom loop. And nobody knows how to stop it. Let's go back to that script we talked about earlier, the one your parents gave you. The one society sold you. Study hard. Go to university. Get a master's degree. Learn English. You'll be successful. Southern Europe followed this advice aggressively. In Spain, the percentage of young people with university degrees skyrocketed in the last few decades. They created the most educated generation in their history. Sounds great, right? Here's the problem: they forgot to build an economy that actually needed them. This is what I call the diploma bubble. And it's catastrophic. Walk into any coffee shop in Lisbon. Order a galeo. The barista who makes your coffee? He's 27. Ask him about himself, and he'll tell you he's actually a marine biologist with a master's degree. The woman wiping tables? She has a degree in art history and speaks German fluently. This is the phenomenon of overqualification, and it's absolutely rampant across the South. Here's the brutal economic reality. Italy and Spain specialize in low value-added industries. Tourism, agriculture, basic manufacturing, food processing. These industries are vital, sure. But they don't need PhDs in astrophysics. They need waiters. They need fruit pickers. They need seasonal workers who are cheap and disposable. So you have this tragic, absurd mismatch. You have a supply of Ferraris, highly educated youth, and a demand for bicycles, low-skilled jobs. When you try to drive a Ferrari on a bicycle path, the engine overheats and breaks down, In human terms, that breakdown looks like depression, anxiety, a crushing sense of wasted potential. There's a specific kind of despair that comes from studying for 5 years, writing a thesis on renewable energy policy, and then being told the only job opening is for a hotel receptionist. And oh, by the way, you need 5 years of experience for that too. In Italy, they call it fuga dei cervelli, flight of the brains. But before the flight, there's the stagnation, the slow death of ambition. The universities are partly to blame. They're often completely disconnected from market reality, pumping out graduates in fields with 0 job openings. It's like a factory that keeps manufacturing VCRs in 2025 because that's what we've always made. But businesses are even worse. Many Italian and Spanish companies are small, family-owned operations. They're terrified of innovation. They don't want some smart young graduate coming in and telling them how to use AI or modernize their supply chain. They want someone who does what they're told and doesn't ask for a raise. So the smart kid looks at this situation and says, I didn't spend 20 years in school to be treated like a medieval peasant. They go to Germany. They go to the Netherlands. And suddenly they're respected. They're paid what they're worth. They're useful. The tragedy isn't just that they leave. It's that the Italian or Spanish taxpayer spent thousands of euros training that doctor, that engineer, that researcher, only for the British or German taxpayer to reap all the benefits of their labor. Free of charge. According to the latest data from Istat, in 2024 as many as 156,000 Italian citizens left the country to move abroad, marking a 36.5% increase compared to 2023, the highest figure in the last 25 years. It's a massive transfer of wealth from the poor south to the rich north. Like raising a prize-winning racehorse for years, then gifting it to your wealthy neighbor for free. If low wages are the wound, what I'm about to tell you is the salt being rubbed into it. Let's talk about corruption, not the envelope of cash under the table kind, though that exists. I'm talking about the soft, socially acceptable corruption that kills ambition more effectively than any law ever could. In Italy, there's a phrase that strikes fear into the heart of every young person: raccomandazione, the recommendation. In Spain, it's el enchufe, the plug. Being enchufado means you're plugged in. You're connected. Here's the scenario. You're applying for a position at a bank or a government office. You're perfect for the job. You have the grades, the experience, the drive. You prepare for weeks. You buy a new suit with money you borrowed. You nail every interview question. You leave feeling like a champion. 2 weeks later, you find out you didn't get it. Who did? The boss's nephew. Or the son of the guy who plays tennis with the mayor. Or the daughter whose father is friends with someone important. Does the nephew have the skills? No. He barely passed high school. But he has the right last name. He has the connections. This destroys a society from the inside out. It kills trust. If you know the game is rigged before it even starts, why play? Why study until 3 a.m.? Why try to be the best? If the outcome is decided before the race begins, the smartest move is to leave the stadium entirely. This nepotism is deeply rooted in Southern European culture. Historically, the family was your safety net. You didn't trust the state, you trusted your blood. In a modern global economy, though, this cultural trait is absolute poison. It creates an invisible ceiling for talent. If you're not part of the casta, children of notaries, children of pharmacists, children of professors, you simply cannot break through. I read a fascinating study about Italian professions. Want to know the best predictor of being a pharmacist in Italy? Having a parent who's a pharmacist. It's literally a medieval guild system disguised as a modern economy. For a young person with ambition but zero connections, this is suffocating. You feel like you're banging your head against an invisible glass wall that nobody else acknowledges exists. Compare this to London or New York. Are those places perfect? Hell no. Nepotism exists everywhere. But generally speaking, if you're a brilliant coder or a talented financier, Wall Street doesn't care who your daddy is. They care if you can make them money. Southern Europe cares who your daddy is first, your ability second, if at all. So who leaves? The nobodies. The hungry ones. The ones who want to win on merit. They pack their bags and go somewhere that judges them on talent, not bloodlines. And who stays behind? The enchufados. The mediocre ones who are comfortable in the system because the system was designed to protect them. This leads to a death spiral of declining quality. The government gets worse. The hospitals get worse. Businesses become less competitive. Why? Because the people running them weren't the best candidates, they were just the best connected. If finding a job is level 1 of this impossible video game, finding somewhere to live is the final boss battle where your controller disconnects mid-fight. Welcome to the Airbnb apocalypse. Let's travel to Lisbon, Portugal, a city of 7 hills, yellow trams and stunning ocean views. It's arguably one of the coolest cities in Europe right now. Hashtag Lisbon is everywhere on Instagram. Now imagine you're Tiago. You're a nurse making about €1,200 per month, which is actually decent by local standards. You want to rent a modest one-bedroom apartment in the city where you work. You open the rental listings. You scroll. You scroll more. You laugh nervously. You scroll some more hoping this is a glitch. The average rent for a one-bedroom apartment is €1,300. Do the math. You're negative €100 before you've bought a single piece of bread. What the hell happened? The world discovered Southern Europe. And I don't just mean tourists. I mean digital nomads, remote workers, golden visa investors. People from San Francisco, London, and Stockholm realized they could move to sunny Portugal, keep their $120,000 salaries, and live like absolute kings. And look, I get it. If I could work from a laptop while eating pastéis de nata every morning, I'd do it too. But here's the economic glitch that nobody wants to talk about. Rents became global but salaries stayed local. Landlords aren't stupid. Why would they rent to Tiago the nurse for €600 a month when they can list the apartment on Airbnb and make €600 per week from tourists? Or rent it to a remote tech worker from California for €2,000 per month? A study in Portugal showed an average 3.7% increase in house prices in its major cities, but in historic centers of Lisbon and Porto, where short-term rentals are heavily concentrated, the effect was far more profound, pushing up prices by more than 30%. Entire neighborhoods, historic districts like Alfama in Lisbon or the Gothic Quarter in Barcelona, have been completely hollowed out. They look like cities but nobody actually lives there anymore. They're just hotels disguised as apartments. The local bakery closes and becomes a trendy brunch spot selling €15 avocado toast. The hardware store becomes a souvenir shop. The soul of the city is evicted and replaced by a sanitized, Instagram-friendly version of itself. This breeds intense, visceral anger. In Barcelona, locals have been spraying tourists with water pistols. In Athens, graffiti reads, "Tourists go home." It's not xenophobia, it's desperation. Young people are forced to live with their parents until they're 35, not because they want to, but because the market has decided they're less valuable than a tech bro on a workation. The choice becomes crystal clear. If you can't afford to live in your own city, you might as well move to a city that actually pays you enough to afford the rent. You move to London. Sure, rent is high there too. But at least the salary matches it. In Southern Europe, you're paying London prices on Moroccan wages. That's a math equation that equals goodbye. Let's say you're brave. You say, screw it. I won't get a job working for someone else. I won't rent from these greedy landlords. I'll start my own business. I'll be an entrepreneur. I'll save the economy myself. Oh, you sweet summer child. You've just walked into the seventh circle of hell. If you want to understand why Southern Europe is stagnating, look at how it treats its entrepreneurs. It treats them like criminals who just haven't been caught yet. Let's examine Spain's autonomo system, the setup for freelancers and sole traders. In the UK, if you start a small business and make €0 in your first month, how much tax do you pay? 0. Makes sense, right? In Spain, if you register as a freelancer, you must pay a monthly social security quota of roughly €230 to €300, regardless of whether you made any money that month. Read that again. You open a graphic design business. You struggle to find clients. You earn €0 in January. The government knocks on your door, "That'll be €300, please." But I didn't make any money. Not our problem. Pay up. It punishes risk-taking. It kills businesses before they're even born. And then there's the Kafkaesque bureaucracy. In Italy, the tax code is so complex that even the tax collectors don't understand it. There are stories of people going to 3 different government offices and getting 3 completely different answers to the same question. Everything requires a stamp, a certified email, a trip to the post office where you wait 3 hours because the digital system is conveniently down. Time is money. And in Southern Europe, the state steals your time with a bureaucratic smile. I want you to imagine the psychological weight of this. You want to build something. You have energy, ideas, passion. But the state puts 50 administrative hurdles in front of you. Meanwhile, your friend who moved to Estonia opened a company online in 15 minutes using an e-residency card. 15 minutes. In Italy, 15 minutes is how long it takes for the public official to finish their coffee break before telling you that you filled out the wrong form and need to come back next Tuesday. This environment crushes what economists call the animal spirits of entrepreneurship. It drives people into the shadow economy, working in Nero, under the table just to survive because doing things legally is too expensive and too complicated. And for the high-flying tech entrepreneur with a genuinely innovative idea, they just incorporate in Delaware or Singapore. They take their intellectual property, their potential tax revenue, their future jobs, and they leave. The irony is tragic and almost funny. These countries are desperate for economic growth, desperate for tax revenue. Yet they've built a system specifically designed to repel the very people who create growth. It's like being desperately thirsty while actively smashing your water bottle on the ground. There's a subtle, creeping consequence of brain drain that's harder to measure than GDP but arguably more dangerous in the long term. It's what I call the museum effect. When all the risk-takers, dreamers, and disruptors leave, what happens to the culture that stays behind? Calcifies. It stops moving forward. It becomes frozen in time. Italy, Greece, and Spain are superpowers of the past. They have the Colosseum, the Parthenon, the Alhambra, the Sagrada Familia. Their cities are UNESCO World Heritage Sites. But a country cannot survive on nostalgia alone. Walk into a tech conference in Milan and compare it to one in Tel Aviv or San Francisco. The energy is completely different. In the South, there's this heavy reliance on tradition. We do it this way because my grandfather did it this way. That sentence is beautiful when you're making artisanal cheese or wine. It's absolutely fatal when you're trying to build software or compete in biotechnology. The brain drain creates a vacuum of new ideas. The people who would have started the next Spotify, the next Stripe, the next groundbreaking startup, they're gone. They're building those companies in London, Berlin, or California. This leaves the home country trapped in low-tech industries, reinforcing the very stereotypes that drive more young people away. Italy becomes just food and fashion. Spain becomes just beaches and parties. But here's what keeps me up at night. The world is accelerating. Robotics, biotech, quantum computing. These revolutions are happening right now. If you don't have the young, hungry, tech-savvy minds to grasp these technologies and build with them, you don't just fall behind, you become a vassal state. You become purely a consumer of technology, not a creator. You end up paying Google, Amazon, Apple, and Microsoft for everything while your own economy produces nothing but olive oil, wine, and hotel rooms. This creates a sense of cultural irrelevance that young people feel in their bones. They look at their country's pop culture, TV shows, political discourse, and it all feels dated. Made for people twice their age. Because it is. When a society stops innovating, it starts dying. It becomes a theme park for the rest of the world, beautiful to visit, terrible to grow old in. Now let's talk about the nightmare that keeps European economists awake at night, staring at their ceilings, questioning their career choices. Sovereign debt. Italy has a public debt of roughly $2.8 trillion, which is roughly 140% of its GDP. Greece is even higher relative to its size. Spain is hovering over 100%. Now, debt itself isn't always bad. If you borrow money to build factories, infrastructure, research facilities, things that produce economic growth, you can pay it back with the returns. But here's the problem. Southern Europe isn't borrowing to build. It's borrowing to pay pensions and healthcare for its aging population. It's unproductive debt. Dead weight. Here's the impossible math problem with no solution. 1. The debt is massive. 2. The interest payments are crushing. 3. To pay the debt, you need tax revenue. 4. To get tax revenue, you need workers. 5. The workers are leaving. See the death spiral? Every time a 25-year-old engineer moves to Berlin, the Italian government loses potentially 40 years of future tax revenue. But that debt burden doesn't disappear. It just gets shifted onto the shoulders of the few young people who stayed behind. This means taxes must go up. But if taxes go up, even more young people leave. It's a fiscal suicide pact. Between 2011 and 2024, about 630,000 Italians aged 18 to 34 officially moved out of Italy. Even accounting for those who later came back, the net loss is around negative 440,000 people. Nearly 500,000 young adults gone for good. And here's what terrifies financial markets. Investors know this. They watch these demographic trends closely. That's why the spread, the difference between what Germany pays to borrow money versus what Italy pays, is monitored nervously by every economist in Europe. If the markets decide that Italy can no longer service its debts because it has no young people left to tax, the entire Eurozone could collapse. We saw a preview of this in 2011 during the Greek debt crisis. But next time, with demographics even worse, it won't just be a crisis. It could be a sovereign default. Imagine you're that young person again. You're told, stay in Italy. Be a patriot. Your country needs you. But what that really means is, stay in Italy so we can tax 60% of your income to pay off the debts accumulated by the generation that ruined the economy, bought all the real estate when it was cheap and retired at 55. Is it any wonder they run? It's not a lack of patriotism. It's self-preservation. I want to pause for a moment. We've talked about money, statistics, policies. But we need to talk about the heart of this issue. Because leaving isn't easy, it's heartbreaking. If you're American, moving from Ohio to New York for a job is normal. It's expected. It's just what you do. But in Southern European culture, family isn't just important. It is everything. Sunday lunch at grandma's house isn't an obligation. It's the center of your universe. The sun, the food, the language, the way of life. It's all addictive. When these young people move to Amsterdam or London or Berlin, many of them are miserable. Successful but miserable. They call it saudade in Portuguese, a deep, melancholic longing for something you've lost and can never fully recover. They trade sunshine for money. They trade the piazza for a cubicle. They sit in their gray apartments in Berlin, eating terrible supermarket pasta, and they cry. I have friends who did exactly this. They make €4,000 a month now. By local standards, they're successful. But they feel like mercenaries. Like they were forced into exile. There's a bitterness that never quite goes away. A feeling of betrayal. Why did my country force me to choose between having a career and being happy? Why couldn't I have both? They live on Ryanair flights. They live on WhatsApp video calls with their parents. They're a generation of orphans with living parents. More than 1 million Italians have left in the past 10 years, a third of them aged 25 to 34. Every single one of those statistics is a broken heart. A family torn apart. Parents who raised their children with love, only to watch them disappear into departure lounges, knowing they'll only see them at Christmas. The social fabric of the Mediterranean is unraveling. The multi-generational homes are emptying. The villages are dying. It's a tragedy of Shakespearean proportions. The brain drain isn't just an economic statistic. It's millions of shattered dreams and broken families. So is it game over? Is Southern Europe destined to become one giant open-air museum, populated only by tourists and retirees? Well, governments aren't completely asleep. They see the numbers. They're panicking. And now they're trying to bribe people to come back. Italy introduced the Rientro dei Cervelli, return of the brain's law. If you're an Italian who lived abroad for at least 2 years and moved back, you get a massive tax break. For 5 to 10 years, you pay taxes on only 10% to 30% of your income. Spain has the Beckham Law, originally designed for footballer David Beckham, allowing foreigners and returning Spaniards to pay a flat tax rate. Portugal had the NHR non-habitual resident scheme, though they've been tweaking it because locals got furious about rent prices. On paper it looks fantastic. You can move back to Rome, keep your London salary if you work remotely, and pay almost zero taxes. But here's the catch. Tax breaks don't fix toxic culture. I've spoken to people who took these deals. They moved back with optimism. And what happened? They walked into an office and the boss still treated them like children. The bureaucracy still took 6 months to install internet. The nepotism was still alive and thriving. One engineer told me, I saved €20,000 in taxes my first year, but I lost my sanity. I'm moving back to Berlin next year. You cannot fix structural, cultural rot with a tax coupon. It's like putting a band-aid on a gunshot wound. It might stop the bleeding for 30 seconds, but the patient is still dying. Unless Southern Europe fixes the fundamentals, wages, cost of living, meritocracy, innovation culture, these schemes are just expensive gimmicks. They're trying to lure people back into a burning building by offering them a discount on rent. However, there is a glimmer of hope: remote work. And it's a massive if, Southern Europe can position itself as a place where you can work for a US or Northern European company while enjoying Mediterranean weather and lifestyle, maybe they have a chance. But that requires infrastructure. High-speed internet in every village, not just major cities. It requires English spoken widely. It requires a government that says yes to new ideas instead of fill out Form 3B and come back in 6 months. Right now they're at a crossroads. They can either modernize radically and embrace the digital economy, or they can slide into complete irrelevance. The clock is ticking. And it's ticking fast. So what have we learned today? We've learned that the brain drain isn't just about people moving for better jobs. It's about a broken social contract on a civilizational scale. It's about a generation that was promised prosperity, handed a diploma, and then given the bill for a party they were never invited to. It's about the Mileurista trap where hard work doesn't pay. It's about the gerontocracy where the past literally eats the future. It's about the diploma bubble where education becomes worthless. It's about nepotism that kills merit. It's about the Airbnb apocalypse, where you become a stranger in your own city. It's about bureaucracy that crushes entrepreneurship. And it's about debt that future generations simply cannot pay. To viewers in Southern Europe, I see you. I know you're not lazy. I know you're not Bambaccioni. You're playing a rigged game on the hardest difficulty setting imaginable. Whether you choose to stay and fight or leave and build a better life elsewhere, you are survivors. You deserve better than what you've been given. And to viewers in the US, UK, Canada, and Northern Europe, do not look away. This isn't just their problem. It's a preview of what happens when societies fail their young people. Look at your own student loans. Look at your own housing markets. Look at your own aging populations and pension crises. Southern Europe is just the canary in the coal mine. They're hitting the wall first, but we're all driving on the same road. If we don't reward ambition, if we don't build housing, if we don't prioritize the young over the old, if we don't create economies that value talent over connections, we will all end up in the same place. A beautiful, sunny, ancient, silent museum. If this video made you angry, good. Channel that anger into action. If it made you sad, I'm sorry. Go eat some pasta. It genuinely helps. But most importantly, if you're living this reality right now, know that your struggle is real. Your frustration is valid. And you're not alone. Drop your story in the comments. Are you from Southern Europe? Have you left or are you planning to? For those who've emigrated, was it worth it? What do you miss most? I read every single comment. Let's build a community of people who understand what it's like to love a place that doesn't love you back. This has been a deep dive into the end of an era. The death of a dream that an entire generation was sold. Subscribe if you want more uncomfortable truths about the global economy. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. And remember, the system is broken, but you are not. Until next time.